Good morning. It is the first Monday of August, which means I gotta talk about the albums I listened to in the month of July 2023. So we're gonna start off with a very quick one, and this is gonna be a quick video anyway, but yeah, Aria by CMD094. This is a electronic, somewhat chiptune type of album, I guess you could say. It's based off of like old Super Nintendo RPGs. Yeah, this was actually covered at the beginning of the month. This is a similar story to that one Astrophysics album, but this one's a little bit different because this album was made by a musician, composer, whatever you want to call them, that, to my understanding, had made music for some games, but due to the ongoing war in Ukraine, those games had to actually get shelved. So I don't know if these are songs that came out of that, or if this was just like a new batch of songs that they made, but in any case, the concept of this album that makes it kind of cool is this is music for a JRPG. And then that came out last year, and since then a game was made using this music to make a game based on the album. Very cool stuff, but the music itself though is really easy to listen to. It's very smooth, especially the song Affection. I believe that is the second track on the album. All of it generally sounds really good, and though I wouldn't say there are like particular tracks that really stand out in my mind, except for the ending song, which I think is called Aria, and the opening. It is a pretty short album, and I would recommend it to anyone that is into, video game music. If you like the soundtrack to Celeste, then you'll probably like this soundtrack too. Now, I'm going to take a step back and actually return to Astrophysics for a second, because I did check out more of their music this month. I checked out their album Cute Tragedies, which I believe came out right before the one that I talked about in that video, and in the last albums I listened to video. This one I think does a pretty good job at displaying what the actual sound of Astrophysics, their music that isn't just a bunch of Hatsune Miku covers, actually sounds like. Because there were a lot of things I noticed with this album that end up feeling kind of similar to what would later show up on Hope Left Me. Again, I'm kind of listening to this backwards, but yeah, there you go. Saw the highlight songs on this. The three that I had on my Spotify were Troublemaking Friends, Kamemushi, and Cute and Sad. Though generally the whole album I actually quite enjoyed. Again, very consistent experience, where it was to the point where I just remember the album itself being pretty good. I can't really pinpoint specific points besides the songs I just listed. However, there is actually one point that I want to talk about, where it is the opening. I thought that the opening was very cinematic for this album. It wasn't something I was entirely expecting, especially since the last album started with just like a bass rumble for I think like 10 seconds. Yeah, this is actually an album that I've had on loop a little bit as well, probably more so than Hope Left Me. Okay, we're already halfway through the list, so now for a little bit of a left turn. Foo Fighters, But Here We Are. Now, before getting into this album that, admittedly, I have been unable to actually listen to a second time, but I do have some thoughts about it just from my initial listen. This is definitely an album that I think requires a little bit of background knowledge to fully appreciate, because there has been a couple of tragedies around Foo Fighters, specifically around really Dave Grohl. Namely, the ones I am aware of is the death of his mother, and as well the death of his drummer, Taylor Hawkins, who had been with Foo Fighters for a really long time. I don't know which album he joined on, I think the second one. But as you can imagine, losing your longtime creative partner and as well losing your mother is going to definitely yield a very particular album. And from what I can tell, the majority of this album really was a Dave Grohl project, with him doing the drums, with him doing the vocals. I want to say he also did like most of the guitars. I wouldn't be surprised. Let me verify that to make sure I'm not talking out my ass right now. Yeah, just know that Dave Grohl did a lot of the work on this album. And yeah, as you can imagine, with such circumstances, you are going to get a very specific kind of album out of this. And it, to me, really is made clear, especially by the second to last song, Teacher, and even the last one, Rest. Really the feeling of mourning from Dave Grohl showing up on this album. It is something to definitely keep note of and even pay attention to when going through his album. And it ends up being a really good album on its own as well. I don't want that to be lost in explaining this. This is a really solid album that does feel like Foo Fighters, but does also push it forward in a way. Like, to my understanding, I cannot think of a 10-minute Foo Fighters song, and yet this album does have that. I cannot imagine it is about anything else, but does feel like a song written to his mother. I definitely recommend listening to this album. I need to listen to it a second time. But I just remember by the end of this album, really enjoying it. And now for an old album, Wish by The Cure. Yeah, so I didn't know this album is now 31 years old, but it is. And it is... Okay, I gotta talk about my experience listening to The Cure for a second. So, there are songs by The Cure that I like. There's even an album, now 2, that I like. But me trying to get into The Cure was difficult because I think I picked 2 albums that just didn't really, they didn't sell me well at all on the band. Disintegration was one of them. That album I really liked. 17 Seconds I remember listening to and really didn't like. I don't think there was a song on the album I liked. I cannot remember if I have listened to Pornography or not. This album, though, was a little bit of a surprise because I was expecting there to be a lot of moments on this album that weren't going to be as good, but sure enough, every song pretty much was consistently engaging and interesting to listen to. Highlights are the opening and ending, but also include Friday I'm in Love, LA to Elise, and as well Cut. Cut especially threw me off a little bit because I wasn't actually going to listen to this album this month, but what ended up happening was I put on Later to Release and then just let the album keep playing and got to about the end. And I think Cut came on, I was like, oh, okay, I'll listen to this, and just kept listening until the end of the album. And then I decided, because I needed another album for this video, I was like, fuck it, I'll just re-listen to this album, but actually from the start this time. One of the things I want to actually talk about a little bit is the opening of the album, because this was something that threw me off in the best way possible. Because the first, I want to say 30 seconds of Open didn't really sound like The Cure and what I expected from The Cure. Now, you get later on in the song, and it definitely is a Cure song, but those first 30 seconds did sound different enough, and it is almost a sound that I think does continue through the album a little bit. It actually returns, in my opinion, it kind of returns with the end, where Open and End definitely sound similar, but it is also appropriate because they do bookend the album. Now, one thing I want to just talk about on a little bit of a tangent, because this is something I might have said before in a video, but I at least have thought about this many times. There was a very particular sound that I always associate specifically with the guitars on Cure songs, and this is a tone that I think, if I haven't said it, I've definitely thought about this with Astrophysics albums. And I didn't mention this before, but I do want to mention this now, because this is a very particular tone to the guitar that I know I have heard on Hope Left Me and as well Cute Tragedies. But I wanted to point out because it is present on this album with the opening of LA to Elise. But it's also really clear on the, and even though this is an album I listened to this month, on Pictures of You on Disintegration. So I just wanted to point that out because this is a thought that I've had now for probably 2 months that I haven't been able to say, and now I have said it. So, okay, well, those were the albums I listened to this month. Anyway, subscribe to the channels. I'm out.